All right, this is the audience participation moment. Those of you in the building, online, anybody remember freeze tag? Get your hand up in the air. You play freeze tag? Yeah, you. Thank you. Okay, yeah. No, we play freeze tag. You run it on the playground. Somebody tags you. You got to freeze. Okay. How about this one? Did you ever play the floor is lava? Or maybe like the playground is lava? So you got to get from point A to point B, and you can't touch the ground, because if you do, then you got eaten by the lava monsters. That's how my friends played it. Like, we had to add some complexity to this, because lava alone is not scary enough. You got to have some lava monsters. Okay, one more. This is your last one. How about capture the flag? Anybody play capture the flag? Yeah, so you got to go get the flag, but what happens when you cross over the enemy territory? You get tagged, you get taken to jail, right? So I was the kid in Capture the Flag where, like, I just put one foot over the line, and somebody was tagging me and sending me to jail because I was loud and I was large and I was not stealthy. But here's the interesting thing, okay, about freeze tag, the floor is lava, capture the flag, and maybe, this is just going to be like, pooh, the big moment for the day. But did you know, in freeze tag, you were not actually frozen? Like, you had the freedom to move. There was one time I was playing with my cousins, and they're about 4 or 5, and they come up and tag me, and they're frozen. And then I had to go do something, and so I just started walking away, and they were like, "No, you're frozen." I'm like, "Actually, I'm not," and I just keep walking. But no, the floor is not actually lava, and you are not actually in jail. And maybe you found this to be true when, the bell rang and recess was over, you all had to go in. You couldn't look at the teacher and be like, "No, I'm in jail. I'm not up for parole for another 15 minutes. I don't know what I can tell you." No, you didn't get to skip math class that way. You didn't get to tell mom, "I can't get in the car because I'm frozen." No, you had to get out and move on, because these were not actually real things. These were lies that we just kind of indulged in for the sake of the game. Now, here we are in our series of the year called Breakthrough. And in this series, really, we are, as a church leadership, as a church family, praying that God would do something really cool in our lives and our hearts in 2022. And maybe there are things that have been holding us back for so long that we're going to wrestle down, we're going to confront, we're going to move through in 2022. And so that's why we're in this series called Breakthrough. And we've talked around the idea of strongholds. And so in week number 1, and maybe you want to go back to dallaschurch.org or the podcast or the website and listen back to some of these, because they do build on each other. So week number 1, we talked about how we need to name our strongholds. We need to confront and acknowledge those things that have been holding us back in life. Because how easy is it to go, "No, I don't have that problem." You just ignore it. The check engine light is not on. I'm just driving to work. But what happens if we ignore it? Pretty soon there's smoke coming out of the engine, or there's a real big problem now. And so we have to name and confront our strongholds. Week number 2, we talked about how basically the number one thing that you can start to do if you're going to start confronting strongholds, we talked about overcoming the terrible trifecta, which we got from the book of 1 John, and it talks about the desires of the flesh, the desires of the eyes, the pride of life, and really the best first step we can take in confronting strongholds is to get close to Jesus. And being in proximity, being near and close to Jesus are the best first steps that we can take. And so today, I'm going to talk about the invisible strongholds. I'm going to talk about the ones that maybe we don't always talk about in church, or they don't get a lot of airtime, but they can still hold us back. I really like Celebrate Recovery's definition of what they would call, they don't actually call it a stronghold, but I love this definition. It is the habits, the hurts, and the hang-ups that hold us back. And I think in that, everyone in the room we're covered under that, right? Like we all have some habits, some hurts, and some hang-ups. We have bad habits, and you can talk about maybe some of those habits are very destructive, and some of them will get you fired, some of them will end your marriage, some of them will put you in rehab, but there are other habits that are very destructive as well, and they are not carrying us towards the life that God would have for us. And so we all have some habits, we all have hurts that we have picked up in this world. We have bumps and bruises on our soul. Some of those that are very damaging are things that we have put on our identity, and it's like someone handed you the sticker and it says, "Hello, my name is," and they handed you the sticker that says, "Hello, my name is stupid. Hello, my name is lazy. Hello, my name is ugly." And what did we do? We put them on our hearts. And it comes back, and it comes up over and over again. And those hold us back. Those are hang-ups. We need help. We need to move out of these strongholds. And so maybe as a church family, just one of the most profound things we can say is it's okay to not be okay. I'm not okay. I'm not put together. I'm not perfect. Now, maybe we also, in the hope of Jesus, say, well, I'm not okay, but I don't want to stay this way. I'm not okay, but I don't want to stay this way. I want to move forwards. And where do strongholds come from? Well, ultimately, it's one little word that causes a lot of problems, 3 letters, S-I-N, sin. And that might not be the trendy or the clinically approved definition to put on it, but that is what the story of the Bible is going to describe as the core issue at the foundation of all of these hurts and habits and hang-ups and the bumps and the bruises and what we get in life. It comes down to the story, and the foundational story in the Bible is Adam and Eve, and they're in a garden, and God tells them not to eat of that fruit, but they say, "Not thy way, but my way. I'm going to take this. I'm going to do this." And then from that, God's creation, which was good. At the Bullock House, we like to use the Hebrew word. We say it was tov. It was very tov. Like God created the creation, and he looked at the world that we live in. He looked at the weather patterns. He looked at work. He looked at human relationships. He looked at human sexuality. And he said, "This is good." And we forget that so often because it is corrupted. And I remember growing up in church, it's been this major mental reprogramming thing that I have to wrestle with to reorient myself to say, no, God built the world and the world is good, but it's broken. And so we go to work and it's hard. And it's the struggle bus. We have interpersonal relationships, and pain and hurt and brokenness enter into them. Human sexuality is now used to hurt people, not in the way that God intended. And so this idea of sin, I think it's important for us to get our head around the biblical way it would be used, because I am used to law breaking, transgressing. As a kid, what'd you do to do wrong? Well, you broke the rules. Well, that's kind of it. But the definition of sin in the Bible is actually about missing the mark. And it's almost like God built our lives. We are supposed to be arrows that fly straight and they fly true. And he has this sweet spot that we're trying to hit and land in. But in the corruption of the world, right, the wind blows and stuff happens. And sometimes, if you're like me and you're trying to do archery, I do not hit the mark and it does not fly straight. It goes all over the place. And when we don't hit the mark like that, that is sin, that is brokenness, that is strongholds. And when it comes to what we talk about in church, I love how honest the Bible is about sin. 1 Timothy 5:24 says this: "The sins of some people are conspicuous." You can see them a mile away. The sins of some people are conspicuous, going before them to judgment. But the sins of others appear later. Now, I was that kid in school. I was like, okay, I don't want to get detention, right? I don't want to get in a lot of trouble. I don't want to get anything that would get a call home to mom. But I will poke, and I will prod, and I will draw a snide little picture on the side of my notebook. And how often do we do that? We have our pet little things that we manage, and we're not jumping in on the big stuff, right? We are not embezzling millions of dollars from the company that we work for, right? We maybe are not doing something or an illicit substance that will get a court order where we end up in rehab. Although, these are things people do. This is brokenness that Jesus can help us move past. But let's not look at some things and say, well, I don't have a series of affairs that will wreck my marriage. Therefore, I'm okay. I'm not okay. We have other things that we deal with. Sin is ultimately an issue with the heart and not with the hands. It's about what goes on inside. And Jesus brings it back to that with the Sermon on the Mount. He's preaching to the people and he says, great job, you haven't murdered anybody. But are you angry with them? Are there people in your life that you think your life would be better if they weren't in it? That's where murder comes from, right? That's what's going on in the heart. Good for you, you haven't had an affair, but have you looked with lust? Have you desired? What's the thought life going on? Jesus takes it back to the heart. 1 Corinthians 4:5 says, therefore, do not pronounce judgment before the time, before the Lord comes, who will bring to light the things now hidden in darkness and will disclose the purposes of the heart. And then each one will receive his commendation from God. And so the other side of this is true. God sees your heart. And so those good things that you do that go unnoticed, those beautiful moments where you are being God's image bearer and you're in the sweet spot, you're hitting the mark. God sees that. But he also sees all of the moments where we fall short, where we are caught up in our hurts and our habits and our hang-ups, where we are held back. And the beautiful thing about God is he sees all of that, and he's crazy about you. He loves you so much. In the same way that I watched my almost 1-year-old daughter taking baby steps and walking and stumbling and falling, and I never, as a father, look at that stumble and go, man, you're just not good at walking, are you? No! I'm celebrating, you fell on your bum, this is great! And maybe that's how God sees some of us, and we've got this picture that God is disappointed in you because everyone else is, and we just wear that as a hurt that we pick up. Well, God, he loves you with the everlasting love. That's what it says for his people. And so if you come away from this message going man, I'm scared of God, or God is not the safe place to go to, you have missed what I'm trying to say, and maybe I did a bad job on communicating that. But at the same time, let's be honest about our strongholds. Let's none of us point the finger and say, I'm good. I'm okay, at least I'm not like these people. I wonder if sometimes we feel like we know what to do with what I might call acute sin, or those not cute sin is not cute, but those moments that they spring up. We say the bad word, right? You hit your hand with the hammer. We yell at the person, the frustration comes out, we fall, we do that thing, it's a one-time event. But what about the chronic sin? What about the chronic struggles, the drip, 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 the day in and the day out? And there's almost we feel like we have to keep them hidden. We can't show that we have a stronghold. Imagine if we were in a war or in the army and we decided it was our job to cloak the enemy's strongholds, their troops and their bases. You can't win that way. And so here we are, we need to be honest and just really talk about stuff. And so maybe some of these hidden strongholds, maybe one of them is giving into hopelessness. I look at the world right now, every time I open my news app, it's bad news. Every time. I was waiting for can somebody save a puppy? Please? But every time I open it, it's bad news. Maybe depression is a stronghold in your life. And I want to put a caveat on some of this, like depression and anxiety and all kinds of mental health stuff. Like, we are very pro-mental health here at Dallas Church. Like, please pursue health. There are some of us who need good, godly, wise doctors to give us antidepressants and to give us medication to help us get through our life. And for too long, the church has said, you just got to pray it away. You just got to have more faith. No! You need a good counselor. You need good healing. And so let's be honest about this. But also, there's a level of hopelessness that denies the truth of Jesus. Like, the whole point of this thing is that someone died on a cross, but that wasn't the end of the story. That God is making something beautiful from the broken and the struggles. And so maybe some of our struggles does have to do with anxiety. And so please, get a counselor if you need it. Maybe it has to do with eating disorders that we've wrestled with our whole life, and it just keeps popping back up. Maybe it is a hidden pornography addiction. The stats are just true. That's rampant in our culture. Men, women, everybody, it's just all over. And so let's be honest that is a hurt, a habit, and a hang-up that people experience in this world. And maybe, right, we're not hitting any websites that are going to hit the Apple parental controls on the iPhone, but a lot of the guys that I'm walking with and a lot of the people that have just very real and honest conversations, it's on the quote-unquote mainstream platforms that some of that struggle comes up. It's on Facebook and Instagram and Netflix. You don't have to go very far off the beaten path. And maybe it's not the internet history or whatever. It's a lust issue. It's out-of-control thoughts. Where are we going with the mind? Maybe it is therapeutic shopping. Have you ever bought something? You don't have to put your hands up right now. Have you ever bought something to make you feel better about you? Whoa. That's dangerous, right? And even if it's like $5, it's inside my budget, right? But I love what Ben challenged us with the question of, with a stronghold, where do you go when you're tired and hungry and anxious and hurt? Like, when we need something, where do we go? Maybe it is therapeutic eating. Maybe it is chocolate donuts that can be purchased very easily at Safeway when you're buying formula for your daughter. I don't know. You never know, what it could be. But seriously, when we're hurt, we go to eat something. Maybe it is rumination on negative thought patterns. It is some of those phrases and that negative self-talk that maybe has been with you since grade school. And it's still there. And you're still wrestling your way through it. That word rumination actually comes from a cow's digestive system. And I apologize for kind of how graphic this might get, but I think that it's really real and really honest. And we do this to ourselves. So the way a cow eats, right? They eat the grass. How many stomachs do they have? I don't know. Somewhere between 3 and 7. Who knows? But I could research that. But the cow, it really only has one stomach. It eats the grass, swallows the grass, and then throws it back up in its mouth to eat the grass again, to then swallow the grass and throw it back up in its mouth. And instead of it passing through, it's just over and over again chewing this. Now, how often do we do that with the fights at work? You ever rehashed an argument when you're driving behind the wheel of the car? They're not in the car next to you. You're not fighting with them right now. But you're going to re-bring this up. You're going to re-legislate, re-fight through that. Or how often is it that those negative stories that I'm a failure, I'm a loser, that comes back up when something goes bad that's not even related to what's going on? You just had a setback at work. But that story of I can't win, I can't do this, it comes back up over and over again. I don't think that's what God has for us. And I might ask us, what's that coming from? What does that match up with? That doesn't match up with what I see God say about me in here. That's stuff I picked up out there. Maybe it's unforgiveness. Maybe it's gossip. Maybe it's pride. The need to perform and to project strength and never be able to say, I'm not okay and I'm weak. Because when you did show vulnerability, you got hurt. Or you were taught that's never something like real men don't cry. Like those are lies. Maybe it's a struggle trusting God. Well, here is the good news. 1 Corinthians 10, 12 through 13 says, therefore, let anyone who thinks he stand take heed lest he fall. For no temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond your ability, but with the temptation, he will provide the way of escape that you may be able to endure it. God knows you. He is not surprised by your hurts or your habits or your hang-ups. He's not shocked. He's your dad and he's crazy about you. And he just wants you to move towards health. And so let's talk about how we actually accomplish these strongholds. Like I've been talking, like this is kind of negative, but I want to be really real. I want to be honest. So how do we actually break through strongholds? Well, something that's been really cool is the fields of psychology and counseling are catching up with what the New Testament has to say. Science is starting to prove some of the things that the Bible has always said. So I do have a book recommendation. If this is something you want to tackle, if you want to move past some of those like things in your mind or those hurts or those habits or those hang-ups, like this is Andrew's recommendation book on the subject. It's called Winning the War in Your Mind by Pastor Craig Rochelle, and it is just an excellent resource that shows how what God's word has to say about reorienting our thoughts, being transformed, not conforming to the pattern of this world, like what God has to say matches up with the path to mental health and the path towards healing. And so this book, it's one that has kind of rocked my world. I've been working through it. And what we start to learn through cognitive behavioral therapy and about neural pathways is that it is easier to think a thought after you have thought that thought before. Think about that for a second. What do I mean by that? It means that when we do something the first time, it's really hard, but the second time, it's easier. And when we say something or we think something about ourselves or about someone else, like the first time, it's really, a little bit more difficult, but we can carve these pathways, almost like a hiking trail. You go across the hiking trail the first time, and it's one way. You go the 100th time, the 1,000th time, the millionth time someone has walked down that. It is a highway. And some of us have built neural pathways towards negative things. There are those lies that keep popping up. There are those temptations that we keep wrestling with. And part of healing is literally rewiring your brain. You talk about biohacking right now. Like you can literally rewire your brain. One of the things he says in this book, he says your life is moving in the direction of your strongest thoughts. And the question is, do you like where those thoughts are taking you? Like where our brains go, we move in that direction. Here's how the New Testament would say it. When it talks about the battlefield of the mind, Ephesians 6:12, it says, for we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. Like this is bigger than just you versus you. This is bigger than just you versus your past. There is a dark force in this world that is seeking to destroy us, and it's a battlefield. And it happens inside our minds each and every day. So I really like this clarification from 2 Corinthians. Paul tells the church, for though we walk in the flesh, we are not waging war according to the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but have divine power to destroy strongholds. This is how we do it. This is how you break a stronghold. Verse 5, we destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God and take every thought captive to obey Christ. We take every thought captive. And I wonder what our life would look like if we did that. Because I don't do that. I have to struggle a lot. Like I don't go after every single thought. And I think I need to. Now, it's almost like I have this picture of like you got all these little thoughts buzzing around in the head, right? And it's maybe you got like a butterfly net, or like maybe some of them are really scary. You got to wrestle them like gators. But like, what if we went after like all the negative thoughts and we said like, no, I'm going to put this thing in jail. Like, it is gone. I am kicking it out. I'm going to wrestle this down, instead of just going, there's like 10,000 negative things on Facebook I'm reading right now. Instead of, taking the feed, instead of taking it from where we get it, from our past, from our history, from our own brains, what if we wrestled it down and said, that's not true. I'm more than that. I'm better than that. I'm God's child. This is the truth about who I am, not what someone said about me years and years ago. Because lies come from darkness. In John 8:44, this is what Jesus said when he was talking to the Pharisees. He says, you belong to your father, the devil, and you want to carry out your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, not holding to the truth, for there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar, the father of lies. And I wonder if spiritual warfare looks less like World War II, or two trenches, or two forces of armies coming against each other, and it looks more like a propaganda disinformation campaign. And where are we picking up the lies from the enemy? And you just start to believe them, because all it takes to make a lie like believable, to make people get it, is you just repeat it over and over again. You repeat it enough times, people start to believe it. And I might ask us the question, as we're wrestling these thoughts down, we're taking every thought captive, whose heart does that thought come from? Whose heart is being reflected in that? Is that God's heart towards you? Is that what you're listening to? What you're meditating on? Or does that come from somewhere else? Because I know for myself, and I talk to other people, where we would never say the things that we say and believe about ourselves. You would never say that to someone in a Bible study or a small group or over coffee to encourage your friend. You would never say, well, you're just a loser and you can't get through life. You can't win. And I don't know what it is. Like, we all get different things, right? And you fill in the blank. You would never say that to someone. You don't believe that about someone else. But we pick it up and we believe it about ourselves because stuff has happened. And maybe being honest, we need to talk about, like, what are the events that reinforce that? Who are the teachers or the parents or the friends or the bullies on the schoolyard? Like, who said what to you that you're just still believing and you're still hanging on? Because it is crazy what pain can do to reprogram and condition a human being. In this book, he talks about his neighbor has a dog. The dog's name is Max, and Max's owners used to have an electric fence. Used to, but the dog will not cross over the line where the fence used to be. Because he learned through those series of shocks and not wanting to go. And that's sad and that's graphic, but when have we done that? We got the shock, we got the frustration, we tried something and we failed. And we said, I can't beat that. This is a quote from the book that just really hit me, kind of between the eyes, and caused me to do some deep thinking about myself. He says, you are constrained by a lie, something that doesn't exist. The enemy has arranged enough hurtful circumstances in key places of your life in which you got just enough of a jolt, a bit of shock, a sting of pain to the heart, that you decided trying even one more time is not worth the risk. And what makes it worse is the number of places where you have stopped trying is growing even larger. How many things do we believe about ourselves? And maybe there's a little bit of truth in there, right? In order to get someone to really believe a lie, you got to get it about halfway there. Because the truth is, ultimately, we are not enough on our own. Like, we need Jesus. We need God. We need God to help us. But that doesn't mean that you will never be enough or you can't live up to the challenges that are in front of you right now. There's just enough of a truth in there that keeps it a lie. And sometimes we just need to be real about it and honest and say, that's just not true. Maybe this is a silly thing, but so growing up, I was the homeschooled awkward kid, pretty much my whole childhood. And it wasn't until a little while ago I was in a conversation with someone, and I was like, well, I struggle with some interpersonal relationships, and I don't know what to do in some social situations because I'm homeschooled. And the person said, hang on, Andrew, you were homeschooled 10 years ago. You haven't been homeschooled for a decade. But I'm hanging on to that. And so let's, as God's people, move out of strongholds. And I don't know what it is for you, but I believe that God has more for you. I got one final book I want to talk about. This isn't a recommendation. You have to read this one, but I love the title of this, okay? Title is Talking Back, a Monastic Handbook for Combating Demons. And some of y'all need a monastic handbook for combating demons. It's by a guy named Evagrius of Pontus, which is the type of name you'd have to have if you're going to write the handbook for fighting demons. Like, you need a name like Evagrius of Pontus. It was written in the 300s, and he read in the Bible, right, Jesus goes in the desert to fight the devil and resist temptation. So Evagrius of Pontus just went, I will go in the desert and I will fight the demons. Well, here's what's interesting about this. You might think that there's going to be some weird exorcist stuff in here. Like, you got to find the holy water, you got to stand on the perfect mountain, you got to cross yourself, do all the stuff. But here's what's really beautiful about this book. All he does is write down a lie and write down God's truth. So he says, when you're feeling sad and like God has not heard your prayers, and he just lists all these scriptures that say God heard it. When the Israelites were in Egypt and they were crying out, God heard them. In the book of Psalms, when David is like, God, you just don't see it. You're not acting. I just need you right now. Well, God heard and God saw. And I love, it's just lies and truth put against each other. And maybe you need to start writing your own monastic handbook about combating demons, like how to combat some of those strongholds or those negative things, and just write it down. This is the lie that I keep telling myself. But what is God's truth? And maybe that's a great homework project for some of us, to start to read through the scriptures that God would actually have to say about us. Because, and this is where I want to bring it back, because with so many of these lies and so many of these strongholds, you are not actually frozen. The floor is not actually lava, right? You are not actually in jail. It is something we can move past, and a lot of it is going on in the mind and in the heart. And I do think that God has more for us. In Ephesians, when Paul is writing to the church, before he jumps in with this is what you need to do and, do all these things, and he jumps in with, this is who God is. Jesus is so big. Like, every single authority on earth is put underneath him. Like, you have an inheritance in Christ. God has so much more for you. And Paul's like, if you could just get your mind around that, that'd be a game changer. And so my big idea, which is going to be really easy for me to say and really hard for us all to do, but if you are in a stronghold, maybe you need to just walk on out. And like I said, that's hard to do. Maybe the door is actually unlocked, and it's a lie that we are still believing about ourselves. And then the struggle is, like, once you walk out of the stronghold, don't walk back in. Because we've got those neural pathways. They're there. You have to do the hard work of taking every thought captive and wrestling it down. And so let's do that. Let's be God's people. Let's pray. Father God, we love you so much. And God, we live in, we claim, we love the fact that you love us. God, I pray for just all of us with our hurts and our habits and our hang-ups. God, that you would help us move past them, that you would help us reprogram, rewire, rework to take every thought captive and make it obedient to you. Jesus, change us. Amen.